This is Elizabeth Chu, the CEO of the South Carolina Historical Society. Welcome to From the Vault, the South Carolina Historical Society podcast, created and hosted by my colleague, Sydney Derrick, our librarian. Imagine spending all day long in a library reading someone else's diary. That is what historians and people who use archives do every day. From the Vault, we'll be telling stories of all South Carolinians from the perspective of the many fascinating items in our large and important archival collections.
Hello and welcome to From the Vault, the South Carolina Historical Society podcast. As you just heard from Elizabeth, I'm Sydney Derrick, librarian here at the Society. In today's episode, I sat down with two of my colleagues here in the archives to talk about some of our favorite American Revolution resources that we hold in our collections, just in time for the Carolina Day and July 4th brouhaha. But before we get into that, let's hear some announcements. And as a reminder, if you're listening to this after the original air date, these announcements may not be applicable anymore. Just another reason to listen early and often. Speaking of the brouhaha, come join us to celebrate the 250th anniversary of both Carolina Day and Independence Day this summer. Our museum at 100 Meeting Street in Charleston will be open with free admission from Tuesday, June 23rd to Saturday, July 4th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We'll have different speaking events throughout those days, a pop-up exhibition featuring the South Carolina Constitution of 1776 on June 27th, mornings at the Fireproof with coffee and history chat, another pop-up exhibition featuring revolutionary documents from our archives, and family-friendly activities throughout the celebration, so head to the Programs and Events tab at our website, schistory.org, for more information. Today's guests are very special because they're people I get to talk to every day, and now you get to hear about their knowledge and dedication to this job, too. Virginia Ellison is the COO and Director of Collections here at the Historical Society, overseeing all archival and museum operations. She holds a bachelor's in anthropology from the College of Charleston and a master's in library and information science from the University of South Carolina. She's a certified archivist and holds a digital archive specialist certificate. Molly Silliman is our Senior Archivist, managing archival services and reading room operations, as well as working with researchers. She holds a bachelor's in historic preservation and community planning from the College of Charleston and a master's in library and information science from the University of South Carolina. She is also a certified archivist. The three of us sat down to describe our favorite items related to the American Revolution and talk about how potential researchers can use the archives. So let's get into it. Molly and Virginia, thank y'all so much for coming in today into the studio to talk about some of these resources. But before we get into the specific items that we want to talk about related to the American Revolution, let's talk about the many types of items that we hold that give us information about that time. So what can you tell us just about the types of materials that we hold in our archives?
Yeah, sure. Well, firstly, thank you for having us today. The Historical Society holds personal families, papers of individuals, social organizations, churches, businesses from all over South Carolina, and from the 1670s onward. And so some of those families and individuals were really involved in the American Revolution and in the founding of our nation. And so within their collections of papers, there are fantastic letters and diaries and account books and things that can shed light on the experiences of South Carolinians during the American Revolution. A kind of founding example is the papers of Henry Laurens, which was the first collection acquired by the Historical Society in the 1850s. And because he was so involved with the, kind of first beginnings of the revolution and the kind of political side, he served, as you know, president of the Continental Congress. And so there's all kinds of correspondence throughout his papers relating to the course of the revolution in the state and the nation. But in addition to just individuals' papers, we also hold several order books for various regiments in South Carolina, which are they're sort of, as you've discussed on the podcast before, kind of like a daily diary for a military unit. So discussing orders given and activities, and they can be incredibly insightful for learning about daily life in a military unit in the Revolutionary War and for larger patterns and the history of different battles and skirmishes in the Revolution. And we have them for several different regiments. So we have the 4th Regiment Order Book, which we've discussed before, and order books for the 1st and 2nd Regiment of South Carolina troops in the American Revolution. And in addition to those, we have several maps from the period, which are both beautiful and informative, and certainly have secondary sources and kind of introductory sources, scholarly research in our reference library for anyone just kind of wanting to dive in and get started with research on the American Revolution.
Yeah, so much to look through and to read about. Well, we have researchers who hail from various cities around South Carolina, other states, even other countries who visit our archives because of how intertwined our state's history is with places around the world. So what's something that you wish more researchers understood about our archives?
2 things. One is that we are a statewide organization while we're located in downtown Charleston. The strength of our collection is Low Country, but that we do have records and materials from throughout the state. The other thing is that we're open to the public. We're not closed. It's not by appointment only, that folks can email us or call us at any time or visit us in person, and we're happy to help. While we can't do the research for you due to the volume of requests, if we don't have the information you're looking for, that we always try to point you in the right direction.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think we can all say, as working librarians and archivists, enjoy trying to help people find the information that they're looking for.
It really is fun sometimes to get in on their search for what they're what they're looking for.
And we usually learn something from them, so it's a fun, kind of interaction.
Yes, absolutely. So we did all choose some items to discuss, even me, because as you mentioned, I am not just the host of this podcast. I am a librarian, so I often work with researchers to help them find resources that they need. And I do want to put a little caveat here. This is not a video podcast. We're talking about items that our listeners can't see, but we do have all of these on our social media platform. We're going to put all of them up there in the post about the podcast, this episode. So if anybody wants to see them, that's where they'll be. We're also going to try and do our best to describe them to the best of our abilities so that you have some sense of what it is that we're talking about. But with all of that said, Virginia, do you want to go first and talk a little bit about your first item that you brought today?
Yeah, I brought a safe conduct pass for a Mrs. Ory from 1781. And this is a really neat piece because it's a small dollar bill sized document that has survived this long that states that Mrs. Ory, most likely Harriet Pinckney Ory, was allowed to travel during the siege of Charleston from her South Santee home, which was most likely Hampton Plantation, without her horses being seized or employed by the British. And this was signed by Charles Fraser, who was the town major at that time. And I just think it's so cool that it's still here, and that it survived generation of Pinckney families, and is now being held by us, and is evidence of what was going on at that time, and that people weren't just secluded in their homes. They were still moving about, trying to live their lives.
And what daily life might have been like in occupied Charleston, navigating with the British, being in control of the city, and what that looked like, and what documents were produced as a result. And this is one of them.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's so fascinating to think you're under this regime that, maybe you support, maybe you don't as a person living in Charleston, but that you still have to get around and do business in the city.
Go about your daily life.
Yeah. I love that one so much. So Molly, what was the first item that you brought?
So the item that first came to mind is one that I find remarkable in the sense that it's really the beginnings of Rebellion, the beginnings of the revolution in South Carolina. And it is the Journal of the Council of Safety, which is a part of the Henry Lawrence Papers. And it records minutes of meetings of the council in June and July of 1775, so before the actual outbreak of hostilities, but it's when members of the Provincial Congress were looking at recent activities and decided to appoint this 13-member council to, in effect, be an executive governor or executive government for the state. And so they formed this council, appointed Henry Lawrence as president in mid-June of 1775. And it's really the day-to-day decisions that were made to essentially rebel against the crown. And it's they were entering information related to troops being raised and the appointing of commanders of the regiments. And they're all end up being big names in South Carolina history, like William Moultrie and Francis Marion are called out by name as they are appointed commanders in these various regiments. And they're also, very importantly, discussing currency and raising money to pay said military. And there's a cool entry on a page 14, where they're discussing design motifs of the paper currency, and include, this symbol of 12 rods represents the 12 colonies in rebellion against the crown. And so it's a really fascinating peek into what would become the state government, but wasn't quite there yet. It was in the beginning stages of forming a government. And so and the fact that we hold the original journal in the hand of Peter Timothy, who was appointed secretary for the council, and it's preserved and housed in the papers of Henry Lawrence. And also recently, it was digitized and is available for anyone to view online on the Low Country Digital Library.
Yes. And it is so fascinating because they are the leaders of the colony, but what they're doing, what the decisions that they're making affect the daily lives of everyone. I mean, talking about the currency design, then that's what people were holding in their pockets. Mm-hmm. Maybe if they had some business that they needed to have a safe pass across town for, they were taking that currency with them to go do that business.
Yeah, exactly.
My first item is a sheet that's a handwritten piece of paper with the lyrics to a song sung to the tune of Yankee Doodle about the 1778 duel between Christopher Gadsden, who was a fierce patriot and military leader, and Robert Howe, who was also a fierce patriot and military leader. So it just goes to show that the question of America's independence wasn't the only thing that folks during that time were arguing over. So I picked this item because it seems unique in that it's a song about the events of the time and not a letter, but it also gives you a sense of what was popular at the time, the sense of humor that was prevalent around that time. So the copy that we have was actually handwritten much later. It's from 1861-ish, or 1851, I'm sorry. But the lyrics were first composed in 1778, sometime after that duel. And it was written by Major Andre of the Royal Army, who was apparently, in researching for this, something of a pop songwriter of the day. He worked, he was British, but he popularized lots of different satirical stories of what's happened, but they also had some historical facts in them, some truth to them too, much like this song. So the duel began as a dispute about military rank. Robert Howe was sent to lead troops in another state, and Christopher Gadsden was appointed to Howe's former role as Brigadier General of the Continental Troops here in South Carolina. But then Howe came back and expected to get his role back, and Gadsden was like, no, this is mine now. And so in 1777, Gadsden actually resigned his commission over this whole ordeal. He was so angry about it. And then the next year, he wrote a letter that was really insulting to Howe, which was an absolute no-no of the day. And so Howe demanded satisfaction in the form of a duel. And that happened in August of 1778. As the song describes it, both men kind of went back and forth about who was going to fire first. And they were sort of telling the other one, like, well, this is your thing, man. Go ahead and fire. And Howe eventually did. He grazed Gadsden's ear. And then Gadsden fired but deliberately missed. He fired at an angle, as the song says, so it didn't hit him. And then that was it. They agreed that that was settled. They had defended their honor. And so they went on about their business. But after he wrote the song, it was published, after Major Andre wrote the song, it was published in Rivington's Gazette entitled An Affair of Honor. And he used the Yankee Doodle tune with more of his songs, more of his poems that he wrote. And I'm not going to sing the lyrics here. Just
Come on.
for everybody's, no one wants to hear that. But it's a really fascinating look into what was sort of the mood of the day. And it's not a long item. It's just about a normal sort of, letter-sized page today, back and front.
I think the listeners should look at the lyrics online and send in their version.
That would be fantastic. Yes, I love that. That could be our new theme song. Okay, Virginia, what's the second item that you brought or that you want to talk about?
The second item is a little account book by William Henry Drayton when he was in his 50s, and it's his diary of going through a tour of the backcountry in South Carolina in 1784. So I chose this because it's following the American Revolution. It details who he's meeting and where he's going, from Charleston to Augusta to 96 to Camden, back to Charleston. And also there's watercolors that go along with it. You don't always get, visuals. So, and I found it really interesting because he's staying with many of the leaders of the American Revolution from South Carolina, such as General Sumter, Captain Richardson. He mentions, Colonel William Danger Thompson's site along the Congaree, talks about Colonel Kershaw. One particular thing was as he's going through Camden, he says, they burnt the courthouse, jail, and greatest part of the best houses. They cut down all the fruit trees and destroyed all the furniture, which they could not carry away. Then again, in our progress after this, from Camden to Charleston, we could trace their last retreat by the stacks of chimneys that appeared along the road.
Oh, wow.
And just, showing the destruction that the British had in that area. So I just found that really interesting from that time period.
Yeah. And talk about, describing something and making it feel visual. That definitely does. I know we can't show people, right now, right here, what we're talking about, but that paints a picture for sure.
And it's also interesting, he's talking about, Columbia was appointed the State House in 1790, and he spent a lot of time in 96. And he says Camden was not as healthy as 96, and he was promoting 96 to be the state capital.
When he talks about Columbia too, it's not even called Columbia at the time, right?
It's Friday's Ferry, and that's in one of the descriptions under one of the illustrations. It's a view of Friday's Ferry. Really, really interesting to think about that, and then what Columbia looks like now.
Okay, well, Molly, what is your second and last item?
My brain was thinking of the upcoming commemorations of the Battle of Sullivan's Island, as this year is the actual 250th of that battle. We have, several really interesting firsthand accounts of the battle in the Historical Society's collections. But one that resonated with me that I've come across before are just some letters back and forth between Charles Coatsworth Pinckney and his mother, Eliza Lucas Pinckney. And there's one letter in particular where he is writing just after the Battle of Sullivan's Island. So it's a letter dated July 7th, so literally days after the battle on June 28th. And he's writing to her. He's stationed at Fort Johnson on James Island, and he's writing to her. And she had been staying out in the country at the Elliots, I believe, with some friends, and he's advising her to go back to the city, to go back to Charlestown, even though the British just attacked. But he says, the country, there's sickness in the country, and I'd advise you to go back to Charlestown. We do not know when the British might attempt to attack the city again, but basically saying, rest assured, you'd have plenty of time to flee the city if indeed we spot them again.
Oh, wow.
And so it's also just interesting. He talks about other kind of practical things. He talks about a sloop laden with 3,000 pounds of powder, blankets, Osnaburgs, nails, and rice, which I did look up later was Osnaburgs, was the cloth that we talked about. So he's talking about practical things related to the beginning of the war, and he talks about a party of the regiment on the Johns Island and James Island militia companies saving the cargo on this ship on the Stono. So they're also just, living here. I grew up on James Island, so hearing these place names in reference to a battle that happens is always interesting. And he signs it off by saying, "I'm going up to Goose Creek today in order to see Sally and my little girls."
Aww.
So he's also a young father at this point, and so it's a personal. It's a very personal letter, but also reflects so much of the actual historical events that happened.
And what I like about that is, he's on Fort Johnson at the time, so you can still go to that area today. The fort obviously isn't there, and kind of look across at Sullivan's Island and picture what that would have been like, it looked like at the time. We still have those places where you can do that. My last item is a circular letter that I'll talk a little bit about, and it was written by the South Carolina governor at the time, Benjamin Garrard. He became governor just after the British left Charleston, so 1782-ish. And so the city and the state are back in patriot hands at this point. And he writes this letter in April of 1783. It's written to a man named Charles King Chitty, but again, it's a circular letter. So it's meant as kind of like a memo to everyone in the city, and specifically in this case, the planters who have different plantations around Charleston. And Garrard writes that Chitty is to ensure that any planter who has not given 1/3 of their rice crop as provisions for the army, Chitty is empowered to take it or to take an equal amount of corn instead. And it says, quote, "Whoever cannot make it most clearly appear that 1/3 of their crop of rice has been furnished the army, but instead thereof have beaten out their rough rice without having furnished 1/3 part as forage to the army, shall, agreeable to the requisition of the executive and confirmed by the legislative authority, have as many bushels of corn taken from them, and must in place thereof feed their negroes with clean rice or provisions, that they might be on a footing with those who have contributed 1/3 of their forage." So that's a long quote, I know. But basically he's saying that they have to contribute some of this, or will take something that they need for other purposes. And that's one of the reasons that I actually picked this letter, because one, that it was written at the very end of the war. So victory was announced in Charleston in late April 1783, and this is April 2nd, 1783. So you kind of get a sense that right up until the end, everybody was expected to still pitch in. I mean, I think at this time there was a sense that the Americans were winning. The British had left Charleston at least. So, but everybody was still expected to kind of pitch in and make sure that the army was taken care of. But the other reason that I thought that it was interesting is because you see the sacrifice that not only the wealthy planters were expected to give, but also their enslaved workers. They had to take food out of their workers' mouths and either give them clean, good rice that they could therefore then not use to make money on, or, figure something else out, basically. So it kind of was that trickle-down effect to everyone, even people who had no decision-making in this process. So I thought that idea of sacrifice gives us an insight into how the war affected all of those, even the people who weren't actively serving as soldiers. And that document is just a simple looking letter. It's handwritten, obviously. It's not a broadside that you would think about that was distributed, printed by a printer and distributed. It's just a handwritten document. So I don't know if it was printed later or if that was the copy that was just sort of read out to people. I'm not sure, but it's a pretty simple document to look at. We're starting to wrap up here, but of course, before we go, we have to talk about the different ways that people can access all of these resources. So let's start at the beginning of the research process, because our whole catalog is available to search online. So Molly, where can folks find that catalog, and what kinds of information can they search?
Yeah, so you can access our online catalog from our website, which is schistory.org, under the Archives tab. There's a link there to getting started with your research. And the online catalog is a search, kind of like a search engine, in that you can enter in keywords for information that you're looking for, and it will search descriptions of our collections. And so for our manuscript collections, for collections that are boxes of documents larger than maybe a box or two, there'll be some description in the online catalog. And then sometimes we also have a finding aid for a collection, which is essentially an inventory. And so that allows us to go into more detail about what's in the collection. And so that way, say if a collection we have is 100 boxes, so that way you can click on that, and it's linked in the online catalog. It'll say SCHS Finding Aid. You can click on that and then do a keyword search within the finding aid to see what particular boxes you might want to take a look at when you're in person doing research. But we also have, again, descriptions of our secondary sources and books and pamphlets and maps and everything in the online catalog. And you can also search by author's name if you have a particular author in mind, or by linked subject headings. Those can be really helpful because if you click on that link, it'll take you to all other catalog records for items that have to do with that same subject. And that's all available on our website.
And I've used those subject links and subject headings just for like this kind of stuff. Like if I want to research more about the American Revolution, that's a subject heading that I can click on, and it'll show me all the documents related to that subject heading.
Yep, exactly. In the catalog, you can also filter. There are facets on the left-hand side. Say you are just looking for original primary sources and not necessarily a secondary book published about a certain topic. You can limit it to archival materials and collections, and that will weed out books and things that have been written about a certain topic and get you down to the original sources within our manuscript collections.
Which is helpful for college students who are researching, who need primary sources. Hint, hint.
Yeah.
So, of course, though, Virginia, we do have some items that are digitized and can be viewed in their entirety online. So how do folks access those?
Yeah, we always have a digitization project going on. We work closely with the Lowcountry Digital Library, which feeds into the South Carolina Digital Library, SC Memory, and that feeds into the Digital Public Library of America, dp.la. Some of the things that we have on the Lowcountry Digital Library are the Henry Lawrence papers, the church records of the Circular Congregational Church in downtown Charleston, the Agricultural Society of South Carolina, and many, many, many more. So please check that out.
For those who are able to visit us in person to do their research, let's tell everybody a little bit about that process, Molly.
So we are, as Virginia mentioned earlier, we are open to the public. You do not have to have an appointment prior to coming in, although we welcome, certainly, if you want to reach out to ask any questions ahead of your visit, you are welcome to do so. But we're open to the public Mondays through Fridays from 9 a.m. to noon and 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And we are located in the College of Charleston's Addlestone Library. We're up on the third floor of the library. And we share a reading room with the College of Charleston's Special Collections Department. And so researchers have access to both institutions' collections up on the third floor of the library. When you come to the library, there is a visitor's check-in station at the entrance to Addlestone Library where you show a photo ID, they print you out a visitor sticker, and then you come on upstairs to the third floor. And we always have staff on the reference desk in our reading room who will help get you signed in. We have a quick researcher registration form, which goes over things like pencils only, putting bags away, no food or drink, all these kinds of things that are pretty standard for doing research at an archive. And then our staff there will help actually pull the materials for you. And you are welcome to come in with a list ready to go, or you're welcome to come in and just say, hey, I'm researching this. What do you have? So we're there to help you do your research and make suggestions along the way. and, it's available again to anyone interested in South Carolina history.
Yeah. And one thing that I think is important to point out, because you mentioned it there, our archives are housed within the College of Charleston's Ellison Library, but we are still our own separate entity.
Correct.
We, have our own collections that are separate from College of Charleston special collections. It's just a roommate situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Stop shop for researchers.
Yes.
Right. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. We've been partners with them for many years, and it's a great source for researchers because, again, you can access both institutions' collections from this one place.
Yeah. And of course, for those who aren't able to make the trip to Charleston, we do offer reproduction services. And there's more information on our website under Archives and Research Services. From there, you can submit a form online detailing the portion of items that you would like us to scan for you. Now, a caveat here that we are only able to reproduce about 25% of a collection. So it's not typically a situation where we can scan all of the papers from a collection, but we can work with you on narrowing down your request to fit your needs. And then once you submit a request, we respond with an invoice and a link to pay online. The service is $25 an hour, and when we look through the amount of items that you're requesting scans of, that's when we can determine the amount of time it will take and the cost that we can get an estimate to you. And then once you pay the fee, we add your request to the queue, and we do receive quite a lot of requests. So sometimes that queue can take a few weeks, and it'll take a few weeks to get the scans, but we are always working on it.
And we do also offer research services too. So if you say, maybe with reproduction services, you see something in the catalog, you're like, oh, I want a copy of that, and you would submit that request. If you are just getting started or you don't see anything specifically in the online catalog, we do offer now research services as well, where our staff researcher will actually do the research for you and scan or photocopy any relevant material found. And also provide a list, if relevant material isn't found, provide you a list of all of the sources, all of the collections that were checked during the search. And that information is also on our website under the Archives and Services tab. You'll see the Research Services tab there as well.
Thank you for pointing that out, because that is wonderful. So, of course, if you have any questions about the information that you heard today, you can reach out to all of us, our archivists, at library@schsonline.org.
Thank you for having us on today and getting to talk about this. And it's a treat, truly, to be able to dive into our collections more. A lot of our day is spent assisting or guiding other research interests, and so being able to really spend kind of one-on-one time with specific collections is always a treat. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say just don't be scared to ask us.
Yes.
I mean, we enjoy pulling that loose thread and digging into the research and jumping from different events, time periods, people throughout South Carolina history throughout the day.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because sometimes archives can be intimidating, but we love to help. So that's what we're here for. Yeah. Well, thank y'all so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sydney.
And thank you for listening. We hope you get a chance to check out the events to celebrate America's 250th here in South Carolina or wherever you are. We'll see you back here next month post 4th of July celebrations to talk more about South Carolina history.